Well, the time is just gone 9:39 a.m. and the question we need to ask is a federal autonomy feasible in South Africa? Can it become a reality? Because when one looks at South Africa, we've got 9 provinces, and each province is being run to a certain extent by a provincial government, but again, reliant on a national government to a large extent, but also looking at South Africa, the problems that the country is faced with on a national level. And these issues impact on provinces, the ability of provinces to run efficiently, and it certainly does impact. And let's just take an example. For instance, let's look at load shedding. Load shedding is a national problem, but there are provinces that possibly could have the capacity to deal with their own problems, and for the benefits of their cities, for their metros. I mean, they could, to an extent, overcome some of the challenges that they are faced with. Other issues include things like policing, public transport, looking at trade, looking at many of these coastal cities where there are harbors, and also many other functional areas. Now, looking at the Western Cape and this proposal in May, which was tabled, the Western Cape Provincial Powers Bill, aimed at identifying and remedying the failures of national government, and also the ability to federal to be able to deliver services. And we are talking about federal autonomy, and this is the reason why we are talking with JP Smith, the City of Cape Town's Mayoral Committee member for Safety and Security. JP, good morning to you and welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning.
Yes, JP, just looking at some of the issues that I've highlighted in my introduction. Now, this bill, to some, it may be, or this proposed bill, to some, it may be controversial, but looking at the Western Cape in particular, and for many of us who have been to the Western Cape, some actually go to the extent in saying that when you are in Cape Town, you are in a different part, you are in a different country compared to the rest of South Africa. And let's just talk about the thinking and the motivation behind this Western Cape Provincial Powers Bill.
I think that the time for the legislation has come. Our constitution does, in fact, as you've said earlier, enable a whole range of decentralization of power. There are all kinds of powers that national government can affix to provincial and local government on an agency basis. Various laws enable this. We have used these laws as far as we can. So, for instance, the Second-Hand Goods Act in Cape Town was the first municipality whose enforcement staff utilized those provisions to be able to do more effective metal theft enforcement. The provincial government wrote a Provincial Liquor Act to allow, which includes, again, the city's enforcement staff as liquor enforcement officers. So we've done what with devolution as much as we can within the current framework, but there's also instances where national government is able to devolve power where it chooses not to, because the current national governing regime is deeply committed to centralization and are constantly coming up with new ideas of centralization, such as the single police service that they propose. So at this stage, provincial government has said that we want to have an encoded set of rules that start guiding us towards how we identify these powers, how we engage in public participation, and how we then start moving these powers to provincial governments and allow those decision-making and the exercise of power to happen closest to the people who are affected by them, and therefore with the greatest accountability of those public office bearers and those administrations. And that's definitely the right way to proceed. At this stage, we've identified various areas, including things like water and electricity and rail and policing and transport issues that we believe can and should be devolved. And in many of these cases, we've been stepping into these spaces over the last 5 to 10 years. In any case, such as with policing, where we do gang and drug enforcement, we're increasingly doing information management and investigations. So many of the local authorities have been compelled through the receding SAPS resources to increasingly step into the crime prevention space.
Yes, but also JP, when one looks at South Africa, and we've got 9 provinces in the country, each province is unique, in a sense that it's got its own dynamics that are playing out. It's got its own areas of opportunity. It's got its own areas of risks, and obviously successes and failures. And looking at the Western Cape in a particular, and we know that for a long time now, the Western Cape government obviously is looking at pursuing greater autonomy, and looking at the government, looking at national government, and whether they will exceed that, to this bill is another matter. But just exploring some of these areas. And we know that the Western Cape has been one of the best run provinces in the country, and it has been the case for a very, very long time. And looking at the people at the Western Cape, and I'm sure that there are many that are saying that what has the problems in Gauteng got to do with us, or perhaps in Northwest or Mpumalanga or anywhere else around the country? Is this hampering development in the Western Cape?
Absolutely. I think that there are key areas of delivery where the lack of forward planning, such as with the inability to secure a reliable power supply, is causing massive economic damage and challenges. Over time, we've seen the challenges with bulk water supply severely constrain municipalities and their economic growth and therefore job creation. And so challenging circumstances in our country are made worse where national government makes policies or decisions that don't speak and don't work well for local communities, where a provincial or local government running that could be more swift-footed and could come up with solutions that are unique to their particular situation. This is the blueprint followed by most of the more prosperous and successful nations around the world. The current attitude towards centralization is a bit of an anachronism. It's something out of the 60s and 70s that national government is still clinging to. And around the world, you have seen that where power is effectively devolved, an effective local and state or provincial level power is exercised, that the controller of is usually more effective and more capable. So we think that this is a debate whose time has come. It's not about national government acceding to it. The whole point of the Provincial Powers Bill is that it starts putting out a framework for the adoption of these powers. The only way in which national government will be able to prevent this or contest it will be to do so in court. And then a constitutional court will have to look at the essentially federalist nature of our constitution and say, the legislation by the provincial government is reasonable, and hopefully by that time the legislation by other provincial governments, because a lot may change over the next 12 months, and that other provincial governments start doing likewise, and that maybe policing and maybe various other functions or mandates should be moved to other spheres of government who are more capable of running them, and that we will end up testing in court. And I think that we may be pleasantly surprised by the outcome. You will note that there was a case recently that went to the Constitutional Court around the powers of local authorities to make bylaws, and that these are not, in fact, subordinate to national legislation. Within our constitutional powers, as spelled out by Schedule 4 and 5 in the Constitution, we are enabled to make such laws. Provinces doing this in terms of their schedules, and this is what will need to get tested in court. It's a court challenge we look forward to.
Well, also, I think, JP, when one looks at it, essentially, what the Western Cape provincial bill is calling for is a right to a self determination. What level of support do you have as far as this particular matter goes?
So you will know that there is a debate in the Western Cape around a group called Cape Exit. There are a number of political parties who endorse the idea of independence for the Western Cape. This bill is not doing that at all. There is a separate bill being proposed by the Freedom Front called the Provincial People's Bill that essentially approaches this from an identity politics perspective and say, these are the people of the Western Cape. We are different from the rest of the country, and we should have self-determination. So this is not the view here at all. This acknowledges that we're one nation, that we're interdependent on each other, and that the difference here is that decision-making does not have to happen at a central point. You can devolve power to provincial and local government where they're capable, and often in many spheres now they are more capable than national, and that the time has come for this debate in South Africa. There are many essential services, police maybe being the one that affects most people most regularly, that has been run into the ground and is really suffering at the hands of national government, where devolution is probably in the interest of the police officers themselves to have a more accountable and accessible government that is directly dealing with them, whether at provincial or local level. And that happens elsewhere in the world as common cause and as a matter of best practice. And it is time for South Africa to review the approaches to governance that were formed in the 90s. The world really has moved on.
JP, just looking at timelines, and I know this bill was tabled in May. Where are we at this point in time? And just looking at taking this bill forward, what needs to still happen?
So that's out for public participation. The provincial government yesterday said that they were confident that they would deal with this public participation quite expeditiously, and that we would be able to move towards legislation before the end of the year. And then we will start testing the first aspects where we have the strongest case to make in court around the devolution of specific mandates. That is something I'm looking forward to. And I'm hoping, of course, that policing will be one of the first. There are key areas that where national government have really neglected SAPs in terms of the deployment of senior managers, where, I don't know, our last 7 or 8 national commissioners, with one exception, have all ended in scandal, where the modernization of the service is lagging, where the resources are lagging, where key low-hanging fruit like your detective services are suffering. They're just fundamental stuff that can be improved. And where we have shown, for instance, in Cape Town that we can, there is a better way to do it. So I'm obviously hoping this happens sooner rather than later, and that the city of Cape Town or the provincial government is able to start managing the policing functions. That doesn't mean you devolve all policing functions, but certainly components of it are readily devolved, as happens in most modern democracies around the planet.
Well, JP, we're going to watch your space with a lot of interest, and I'm sure the next few months we will see some interesting developments. But for now, we thank you for taking time out this morning, talking to us right here on Solar Media.
Very welcome, such a huge pleasure, and we hope this is precedent setting for the rest of the country and that other provincial governments are suitably inspired.
JP Smith with us this morning, the City of Cape Town's Mayoral Committee member for Safety and Security, against the background of what is the Western Cape Provincial Powers Bill. The time is just gone 9:52. We've got one more interview to this morning, and that is with the Executive Manager for Social Innovation at the organization Undoing Tax Abuse. We're talking with Julius Kleinhans.